The President of the United States just told a foreign leader he's done thinking purely of peace because he didn't get the Nobel Prize. And now, he's threatening NATO allies with tariffs, demanding control of an island with 57,000 people, and European markets are in panic mode. This isn't a headline from some dystopian novel. This happened yesterday. And if you think this doesn't affect you, the emergency EU summit scheduled for Thursday says otherwise. Here's everything you need to know. What just happened? Let's start with the facts. On Sunday, January 18, 2026, US President Donald Trump sent a text message to Norway's Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre. Not an email, not a diplomatic cable, a text message. And what he said should concern every person watching this. Trump wrote, "Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America." Norway's government released these messages publicly on Monday. This wasn't a leak, this was an official release. Here's the context. Trump has intensified his push to take control of Greenland from Denmark, a fellow NATO member. Not negotiate influence, not establish a base, take control, wrest sovereignty. When NBC News asked him whether he would use military force to seize Greenland, Trump declined to answer. He didn't say no, he declined to answer. Instead, he vowed to implement a wave of increasing tariffs, starting February 1st on EU members, Denmark, Sweden, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Finland, along with Britain and Norway. The condition, until the US is allowed to buy Greenland. Greenland has 57,000 people. For perspective, that's less than the population of Hoboken, New Jersey. Why the Nobel Prize? The Norwegian Nobel Committee awarded the 2025 Peace Prize to Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, not to Trump. And according to his own message, this decision has fundamentally altered his approach to foreign policy. Trump claims he stopped 8 wars. The Nobel Committee disagreed. And now, according to his own words, he no longer feels obligated to think purely of peace. Why Greenland matters? Let's address the obvious question. Why Greenland? In his message to Norway's Prime Minister, Trump stated that Denmark cannot protect Greenland from Russia or China. He then asked, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? He concluded, the world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Complete and total control. Those are the exact words. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen responded during a visit to London on Monday with this statement. We are living in 2026. You can trade with people, but you don't trade people. Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen posted on Facebook. We will not let ourselves be pressured. We stand firm on dialogue, on respect, and on international law. On Monday, Danish soldiers landed in Kangerlussuaq, Western Greenland, as part of the Arctic Endurance military exercise. This was planned, but the timing is significant. Trump dismissed this deployment entirely. Speaking to reporters in Florida before boarding a flight to Washington, he said that wasn't a military. They sent a few people, and they say they sent them not for me, but to guard against Russia. But you know, NATO has been warning Denmark for about 20 years now. Longer than that, 25 years. They've been warning Denmark about the Russian threat, and it's not only Russia, it's also China. The NATO crisis. This is where the situation becomes critical. The dispute threatens to upend the NATO alliance that has underpinned Western security for decades. NATO was already under strain over the war in Ukraine and Trump's previous statements that he would refuse to protect allies unless they increase defense spending. Now, the United States is threatening economic warfare against multiple NATO members over territorial demands on another NATO member. This is unprecedented in the alliance's history. Market reaction. Trump's threat has sent shockwaves through financial markets. Investors fear a return to the volatility of 2025's trade war, which only eased when the sides reached tariff deals in the middle of the year. European industry has been rattled. We're talking about potential tariffs on 93 billion euros worth of trade. That's $108 billion. The tariff timeline. Here's the timeline you need to understand. February 1st, Trump has vowed to implement increasing tariffs on the countries mentioned unless the US is allowed to buy Greenland. February 6th, the EU has a package of tariffs on $108 billion of US imports that could automatically kick in after a 6-month suspension ends. Thursday, January 22nd, EU leaders will discuss options at an emergency summit in Brussels. The European Union has 2 primary tools they're considering. First, the automatic tariff package I just mentioned, targeting $108 billion of US imports. Second, something called the Anti-Coercion Instrument, or ACI. This has never been used before. It could limit US access to public tenders, investments, banking activity, or restrict trading services. The US has a trade surplus with the EU in services, including digital services. This would hit American tech companies and financial institutions hard. The EU stated they are continuing to engage at all levels with the US, but the use of the ACI is not off the table. What US officials are saying, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told reporters in Davos, it would be very unwise for European governments to retaliate. He also said, I think it's a complete canard that the president will be doing this because of the Nobel Prize. The president is looking at Greenland as a strategic asset for the United States. So the official position is ignore what Trump literally wrote in his text message to Norway's Prime Minister. The World Economic Forum in Davos is happening this week. This is the annual gathering of the global political and business elite. And this year, it's about to become a high-stakes diplomatic showdown. Norway's Prime Minister Støre announced he would change his schedule to attend Davos on Wednesday and Thursday, overlapping with Trump's planned appearance. Norway's Foreign Minister Espen Barth Eide stated the country will not change its stance on Greenland. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said he would try to meet Trump on Wednesday. His quote, "A trade dispute is not wanted, but if we are confronted with tariffs that we consider unreasonable, then we are capable of responding." When reporters asked Trump on Monday what he planned to say to European leaders in Davos about his Greenland plan, he responded, "I don't think they're going to push back too much. Look, we have to have it." He continued, "They have to have this done. They can't protect it. Denmark, they're wonderful people, and I know the leaders, they're very good people, but they don't even go there." British Prime Minister Keir Starmer called for calm discussion between the allies. He also said he did not believe Trump was considering military action to seize Greenland. That statement is worth examining. Trump was directly asked by NBC News if he would use military force. He declined to answer. Yet Britain's Prime Minister doesn't believe military action is being considered. That's either diplomatic optimism or willful blindness. Russia declined to comment on whether US designs on Greenland were good or bad. But they did say it was hard to disagree with experts that Trump would go down in world history if he did take control of the island. Russia, currently at war with Ukraine and under massive Western sanctions, is watching NATO potentially tear itself apart over Greenland. Consider what that means for global security. What this means for you. Let's bring this back to what matters for regular people watching this. If these tariffs go into effect on February 1st, prices will increase. European goods will cost more. American exports to Europe will face retaliatory tariffs. This affects jobs, consumer prices, and economic stability on both sides of the Atlantic. The 2025 trade war created volatility that impacted retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and business planning. We're potentially headed back into that environment, but this time with NATO itself at stake. Beyond economics, there are fundamental questions about international order. Can one NATO member threaten economic warfare against other NATO members to seize territory from another NATO member? If the answer is yes, what does NATO mean anymore? If the answer is no, how do European nations respond when the world's most powerful military and economy makes these demands? Here's your action timeline. This week, watch what happens at Davos. Are there face-to-face meetings between Trump and European leaders? What gets said publicly versus what gets negotiated privately? Thursday, January 22nd, the EU Emergency Summit in Brussels. Do they activate the ACI? Do they commit to the tariff package? Or do they attempt continued negotiation? February 1st, Trump's stated deadline for implementing tariffs. Does he follow through? Does he escalate? Does he back down? February 6th, the EU's automatic tariff trigger date. If both sides implement tariffs, we're in a full trade war. What you can do, if you have investments, talk to your financial advisor about exposure to transatlantic trade. If you run a business with European connections, develop contingency plans for tariff scenarios. If you're a citizen, pay attention to how your representatives respond. This isn't just about Greenland. This is about whether international law, alliances, and diplomatic norms matter, or whether territorial demands backed by economic threats are the new normal. Contact your elected officials. Whether you support Trump's position or oppose it, make your voice heard. This decision will shape international relations for decades. The bottom line is that the President of the United States has linked his foreign policy approach to not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. He has demanded control of Greenland from a NATO ally. He has threatened massive tariffs against multiple NATO members and other close allies. He has declined to rule out military force. Financial markets are reacting. The European Union is preparing retaliatory measures. An emergency summit is scheduled for Thursday. And all of this is happening over an island with 57,000 people that Greenland's own Prime Minister says will not be pressured and stands firm on international law. We are watching a potential turning point in the post-World War II international order. NATO has been the foundation of Western security for 75 years. The idea that territorial sovereignty is decided by international law rather than force has been a cornerstone principle since 1945. Both are now being tested by the country that helped create them. My final thought, whether you think Trump is making a brilliant strategic move or a catastrophic error, whether you think Greenland should be American or Danish, whether you care about the Nobel Prize or not, none of that changes the immediate reality. In 10 days, on February 1st, we'll know if this was a negotiating tactic or the start of a transatlantic crisis that reshapes the global order. The emergency summit is Thursday, Davos is this week. The clock is ticking, stay informed, stay engaged. This story is far from over. If this video helped you understand what's really happening with the Trump-Greenland crisis, hit that like button right now. We need more people to see this before February 1st. I'll be tracking every development, from the EU Emergency Summit on Thursday and the Davos meetings this week. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the updates, because this situation is moving fast. And what happens in the next 10 days will determine whether we're looking at a negotiation or a full-blown transatlantic crisis. Drop a comment below. Do you think Trump will actually follow through with the tariffs on February 1st? Or is this a negotiating tactic? I read every comment and I want to hear your take on this. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what's at stake. Your family, your colleagues, anyone who's asking what's going on with Greenland. Send them this breakdown. I'll see you in the next one. Stay informed, stay sharp, and let's keep watching this together.